Hi, Acadiana. I'm Meteorologist Dave Baker. Happy Friday to you. I know it's been a heck of a week, and a lot of folks are looking forward to a weekend. I know there's still a lot of our friends in southeastern parts of Acadiana as well as southeastern Louisiana still trying to get back on their feet, especially when it comes to electricity. I have been hearing, though, from some folks and friends that are down in southeastern Louisiana that most of the damage has been generally with some flooding, also a lot of tree damage, but not as much in the way of infrastructure damage. So they're really just trying to get the power back on. And it does seem like most folks that are down in southeastern Louisiana are optimistic that things are going to be getting back to normal, at least as we get through the weekend. And they're also quite thankful that the damage wasn't any worse than what it was. I know all of us here in the immediate Acadiana area are very thankful that our lives weren't disrupted a whole lot, and really hope that those folks down in southeastern Louisiana can be back up and running here over the course of the weekend. So let's go ahead and get started. Really pretty day here in Lafayette. We've got a few clouds that are starting to pull in here. Temperature 86 degrees. 89 is what it feels like out there. The dew point dropping into the upper 60s. So by early September standards, it's not terrible out there. Humidity 55%. A decent breeze though out of the northwest at 13 with some occasional gusts getting there over 20 miles per hour. And our pressure is still coming up from the what's left of Francine, kind of still drifting over the mid-Mississippi Valley, but it's up to 2990. Look at those skies out there. Very, very pretty. If you're looking to the west, you've got blue skies, and if you're looking off toward the east, you've got a few puffy clouds out there. But it looks like the roadways are nice and dry across Acadiana, so at least in the immediate area, traveling is okay. I do want to warn you, though, if you are going to be making your way over to southeastern Louisiana, there still are a few problems out there and some issues on the roads. Mostly it's the power outages, though, but I will say that this map has improved even from earlier this morning. Yesterday at about this time, we had a little over 300,000 customers that still didn't have power. And today we're looking at just over 100,000. So 2/3 of the folks that were in the dark yesterday have power today, and really hoping that the recovery effort speeds up here now and we can get everybody back on the grid here and get their electricity going, and they can enjoy the typical comforts of home that all of us kind of rely on. So first of all, want to go to the U.S. satellite here and wanted to point out what was left of Francine. It was a hurricane, of course, making landfall day before yesterday as a Category 2, and most of the action, the center of it, is really over northeastern Arkansas, maybe southeastern Missouri there. And it's going to kind of drift its way a little bit farther toward the southeast over the next couple of days and just go ahead and fill in. There's a bit of an upper low that's right over it, and it's cut off from the main flow. So that's why we're not seeing a whole lot of movement with what's left of Francine there across the middle part of the country. Locally, no rain to worry about. Had a couple of little showers that popped up over the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico during the late morning hours. But right now it looks like everything's okay. We've got just a few clouds that are rolling across the northern part of the Gulf of Mexico this time around. And for our friends who might want to try to get out there and do a little boating or fishing, it looks like the offshore forecast is pretty good. We'll see west winds about 10, maybe up to 15 knots, seas 1 to 3 feet. And for many of our friends that are getting back to work out on the offshore rigs, it looks like much of the Gulf of Mexico is calming down. And it looks like you got a really pretty day out there with a lot of sunshine. Those seas far offshore are probably running about 2 to 4 feet at best, maybe a few 5-foot seas, but really well out into the Gulf of Mexico. Very, very nice. Out to the east, though, though, you still have a plume of moisture that's bringing some showers and thunderstorms. That's kind of associated with the old low pressure area that is Francine, and that's bringing some showers and thunderstorms to the far eastern beaches there across the state of Florida. We do have one area of disturbed weather, but it's really a cold front and kind of a low pressure area. And just like what we saw with Hurricane Francine, it was kind of a combination of a low and a tropical wave and an old frontal boundary. And right now, there's still a frontal boundary that's draping off of the east coast, and occasionally you can get some low pressure to develop there. It's not tropical in nature right now, but the National Hurricane Center is watching that area for some potential development. And as far as Central America, really in good shape. It was a gorgeous day there yesterday. Another pretty day there today. A couple of showers and thunderstorms off the coast of Costa Rica going down to Panama. And it looks like some thunderstorms there around the Cayman Islands. But other than that, things are very, very quiet along Central America and the western part of the Caribbean Sea. In the central part of the Caribbean Sea, again, not a whole lot to look at here. Possibly a little bit of disturbed weather in this particular region, but there's a decent amount of wind shear right now and some dry air kind of getting entrained. So at this point, the National Hurricane Center is not expecting any development there, at least over the next several days. But we do have a new player that's out there. Yesterday, we kind of touched briefly on Tropical Depression number 7. It is now Tropical Storm Gordon out here in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean, actually in the eastern part of the Atlantic Ocean. Winds have gotten up to 40 miles per hour to qualify it as a tropical storm, and it looks like it's going to kind of hold steady as a tropical storm, maybe weaken back to a tropical depression, but the forecast is a very slow westward movement and also not a whole lot of strengthening. In fact, looking at the discussion, it stays at about 40 miles per hour, drops its way back to a tropical depression for a couple of days. It might have a chance to intensify again into next week, but even the intensification forecast only brings it up to a minor tropical storm, low-end tropical storm, 40, 45 miles per hour at best. So we're going to have to watch this, but I really think this is probably going to be staying out in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a slow mover right now, but we do think maybe it'll make a little bit more of a turn here toward the north and hopefully turn back toward the northeast before it affects Bermuda, and shouldn't be a problem to anyone out there in the Atlantic Ocean other than a lot of fish and the shipping lanes that go across the central part of the Atlantic. Water temperatures, meanwhile, are still relatively warm, although they have come down a little bit over the eastern part of the Atlantic. We still have got some fairly warm waters in the Caribbean as well as the Gulf of Mexico. Even though they may have cooled just a little bit there, all of the waters that are there shaded in yellow or brighter are warm enough to sustain tropical systems. That would be that 80-degree threshold, or about 27 degrees on the Celsius scale. So pretty much all of the open waters of the Atlantic Basin are pretty much open for business, although, again, we have seen a little bit of a cooling here right around the Cape Verde Islands. So this telestrator would work properly. We are looking at temperatures just slightly cooler and even a little bit cooler here right along the northern Gulf Coast, but again, still warm enough to sustain a tropical system. Wind shear over the main part of the Atlantic Ocean, which would be more of an inhibiting factor, is kind of taking its toll here on our tropical storm that's out there in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. But as we look here, we've got fairly low wind shear anywhere from the African coast going over to the Greater Antilles and the Bahamas. And we've got some serious wind shear here across the Gulf of Mexico. So nothing's going to develop in this particular area anytime soon. So if anything's going to develop, it's going to be along a frontal boundary here off the East Coast, or it's going to be somewhere in this development zone based on some lower wind shear. So as tropical systems start to get going, they need low wind shear, because as they start to grow and the thunderstorms start to build higher in the atmosphere, they need very light winds to continue to grow, because if you've got stronger winds in the mid or upper levels of the atmosphere, particularly if those winds are going in different directions, it tends to tear apart those tropical systems, and it gives these developing tropical systems a much harder time to really get going in the development stage. Doesn't really have as much of an effect when you have a full-blown hurricane, but when it's in the development stages, wind shear is not a tropical system's friend. So we're going to go ahead and just kind of zoom our way out for the next 10 days. We're going to go through the next models. I will tell you, we don't have anything much to talk about locally here for the next week to 10 days, but there are a few little hints. It is September after all, and we do continue to see tropical systems forecast to develop. So what's left, or what is, or what may be Tropical Storm Gordon, is really just kind of meandering out in the middle part of the Atlantic Ocean. Then it kind of gets caught up in a front. Here it is right here, and then it might kind of mix in with another low pressure area just to the north, and then we think it's going to kind of take its way off toward the northeast, where it may be able to strengthen a little bit before it rapidly works its way back off toward the central and northern part of the Atlantic. Also, we've got this other little ripple of energy that might have a chance here off the eastern part of the Atlantic Ocean, but again, that's not expected to whip its way around down to the south. And then you may have seen there in that last few frames, so after this moves onshore, notice down here we've got another little trough that tries to develop and kind of lift its way northward. I noticed this on the model this time, but also the previous model, and I've got one other model that's suggesting that, but that's not going until the very end of the month, like September 27th, September 28th. So there is the possibility that we could see something developing a little bit farther down the road that could bring some maybe some tropical weather there over parts of the East Coast. Right now, it does not seem like it's going to be something that would move into the Gulf of Mexico. And as far as that, we'll just continue to kind of watch that there. As far as the Canadian model, or rather the Euro model doesn't go much with what we were looking at there in the GFS over the Western Caribbean, but it does take Tropical Storm Gordon kind of out in the middle part of the Atlantic and then have it absorbed, and it does appear that there's a little bit of a ripple of low pressure on the front there over the eastern seaboard. But the Canadian model is one that looks a little bit more like the GFS, at least going farther down the road. We do have maybe a bit of a trough trying to develop here and then lift its way northward toward the East Coast. So we'll watch out for that. We'll just kind of have to wait, because again, 10 days is pretty far out there when it comes to our tropical systems. And the Icon model didn't quite finish up this morning, so it really only goes out about 6 days, but it is very similar to the other three models, with Tropical Storm Gordon trying to work its way off toward the west, maybe a little bit stronger if it can make its way over toward the northern Leeward Islands. And there are a few areas there across portions of the East Coast along a front where we may get a homegrown system, but that would not be a threat to the Acadiana area. So as we look at the 7-day tropical weather outlook, Gordon is going to remain out there. That little ripple that's over by the Windward Islands, or the Leeward Islands right here, is being affected by dry air and a lot of wind shear, so it doesn't have much of a chance. So I really think if there's going to be anything new that's going to be developing, it's probably going to be somewhere between the East Coast and going over toward Bermuda over the next 7 days. And then beyond that, we will probably see a little more action maybe developing there in the southern part of the Caribbean. And that would be more of a concern for us here at home. Frequency of the tropical systems throughout a normal year, we have reached the peak of the hurricane season. We did that the day before Francine made landfall. We still are in the higher category, at least going through the mid part of October for us here along the Gulf Coast of Louisiana. Once we get into November, we don't really worry too much. We haven't had a hurricane hit Louisiana during the month of November. We've had a tropical storm I think it was back in 1985. I think it was Hurricane Juan was still a tropical storm as we crossed the calendar from October 31st to November 1st, but that was back in 85. So really, as we look into about October the 15th, October the 20th is where we start to breathe a little more of a sigh of relief here on the Gulf Coast. But 2024 has been predicted to be a very busy season, and really all of the signs were there, and we're still looking like we're going to move into a La Nina period. But when we look at an average season here, normally by the time we reach September the 13th, we should have about 8 named storms. We're on number 7 right now. Could we get a number 8 here between now and early next week, or a number 9? Probably not. But so we are a little behind schedule on named storms. We are ahead of schedule on hurricanes because we've had 4 of those, so we've got 4 right there. And as far as major hurricanes, Hurricane Beryl was a major hurricane, and I'm trying to remember how strong Ernesto got. It may have got to Category 3 briefly. So 1 or 2 2. So we're still pretty much on average or just slightly ahead of schedule when it comes to tropical season compared to a normal season. So still have the chance that we could see above normal. We've got 6 under our belt right now, 7 named storms on us right now. And September usually brings 4. So we've got our second one right now. We're not quite to the halfway point of the month. So could we get 2 more before the end of the month? I think that's a definite possibility. So we're still on track for at least a normal season, even though a lot of the predictions were showing an above normal season. And rather than just a slightly above normal season, most of the forecasts were going for a very above normal season. So we still have to wait and see how that's going to go. Released a little while ago or a few days ago, the September ENSO, that's the El Nino Southern Oscillation. Most of the predictions early in the season were showing that we were going to be in an El Nino pattern by the time we reached September. Not quite there yet. We're still kind of in a neutral zone. But this is still predicting, when you look at those blue lines there, this is still predicting that we should, at least more of the models are predicting La Nina going into the end of the hurricane season, while at least the current time it was forecast just to stay in a neutral zone, which is basically where we are right now. Remember, if we do get into a La Nina period, that is one of the signs that tends to bring more frequency of tropical systems over the Atlantic Ocean and a little bit less over the Pacific Ocean. So we still are in that neutral zone, haven't quite crossed over into La Nina, but if we do, it could mean that the end of September and going into October could be a little bit more busy. So good thing that most of us did not have to deal with the effects of Hurricane Francine. And it's also good because I know a lot of you did preparations for this. So keep those supplies because you're still ahead of the game if another system comes in. I've seen all the joking, some of the Instagram reels of moms yelling at their kids getting into the hurricane snacks. If you can keep your kids out of the hurricane snacks, good luck. I had 4 boys and we got through all the hurricane snacks usually before any hurricanes came around. So some funny videos that are out there. As far as September, though, it is still a very busy month. And of course, the Gulf of Mexico, we have over the last 70 years, 80 years or so, we have had a number of tropical systems cross over the central Gulf Coast as well as reach our coast here in South Louisiana. So this is looking at all of the named storms that have been within this region from 2020, I think is what it says there, going all the way back to 1944. So you got almost 80 years worth of data there. And anything in the red, that was more than 70 storms have passed through those areas. 50 to 69 of the named storms have come through the orange areas. So that's about 1 every other year that can come into these regions. So September can still be a busy month, but I am happy that we're at least going to get the weekend off. Well, that's what I've got for you on this Friday. Kind of let you go here. Of course, if you like this video, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and also turn on those notifications. And make sure you're following my social media pages at Meteorologist Dave Baker on Facebook, or you can search Dave Baker Acadiana Weather Today, and you'll find it there. At Dave Baker TV on X and Acadiana Weather Today right here on YouTube. I hope everybody has a great weekend, and I will see you on